Hello, everyone. Welcome to AI 4. Our next panel is the state of AI and supply chains. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the virtual stage. They're all going to turn on their video now, so we'll be able to get this panel started. All right, our moderator is Kermit. Please take it away.
All right, thank you. We have a great panel today. We're going to start talking about AI in the supply chain. Some questions are COVID related. I don't think you can avoid those. But before we get started, why don't we have our panelists introduce themselves?
Hi, I'm Dave Marmor. I'm a senior data scientist. I work for Unilever. I support our North America supply chain. And quite frankly, judging from the titles of some of my colleagues here on the panel, I think I'm the least qualified person to be here, but I'm happy to be here nonetheless.
Hi, my name is Darko. I'm the CEO of CausaLens. CausaLens is a London-based AI company. We believe that current machine learning techniques are broken. We also believe that AI doesn't really exist. And we are here to bring the next generation of AI technology to the world. We broadly call it causal AI, and it's used by some of the most sophisticated organizations on the planet.
My name is Greg Brown. I'm with UPS. I've been with UPS about 25 years. My current focus is on robotics, automation, and strategies around our supply chain, how we bring AI to our network and supply chain to move our customer interests forward first.
My name is Juan. I work for Siemens Corporate Technology. I'm based in Berkeley, in California, and I have the luck to lead a team of researchers and engineers in the area of artificial intelligence and robotics. We are working on the next generation of robotic systems and automation that mix artificial intelligence and advanced robotics to unlock new use cases. And I'm very happy to be here.
And I'm Kermit Threatte. I'm the head of operations research at Wayfair. We have other data science teams. My group is particularly focused on supply chain and building decision support systems to kind of deal with the day-to-day supply chain operations through all aspects of the supply chain. Great, with that, I think we can kind of dive into some of the questions. I think the first one, you probably know the answer to this one already. Quick yes or no, would all the panelists agree that we're in the middle of a AI-driven supply chain transformation?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say yes on that one.
Yes.
I have a slightly controversial answer to that. I think the answer is probably yes, but I would argue that true AI technology does not yet exist. What we really have out there are curve fitting machines, which don't really understand the cause and effect of the real system. And therefore, really what we're doing is we're finding associations in data that have occurred in the past. The key problem with that is that the real world changes all the time, and making decisions based on observed past patterns leads to suboptimal decisions for the future. So I think the answer is yes, but it's also a no, because I think we'll have another revolution where we will bring, a couple of generations later, AI technology that understands true cause and effect, and it's able to make better decisions than the current state of art, which is essentially fitting curve through data. And all you can do with current machine learning techniques is infer correlations that have happened in the past. No matter how complex your methodology is, ultimately, it is a set of simple correlation numbers which have a lot of problems. Like there's no direction of causality. There is no notion of whether this relationship would live in will kind of survive in the future. So I think we will see a lot more disruption once we bring the real AI technology that many of us are currently developing.
Now, even though that was a yes or no question, given what Darko just said, I want to see if any of your other panelists have anything else to say, if you want to add or challenge that, add to that or challenge that notion.
I think what I'll say is that I think that there's going to be a combination of techniques that you use. AI is part of it. Optimization is part of it. And I think that you take advantage of the opportunities that are available with the techniques that are available in combination. Obviously, things will get better as we have more data, reliable data that we can, that's useful. And I think that at the moment, we've got to do what we can to make the best data-driven choice, especially as things are ever-changing so quickly.
I would agree with that. Any other points?
Yeah, I think, yeah, Darko brought a very good point, and Greg too, right? It's not just one technology. Nobody can deny the power of machine learning that we have seen in many fields like computer vision or NLP in the last years. But at the end of the day, it's also based on how good is your data will determine the output of what you can get from there. I think it's going to be a mix of technologies, having also this digital thread that combines everything, and modeling, and the good old-fashioned controls and modeling will play still a big role, and will really reduce the amount of data and help us reason on that data. I mean, we are not there yet. Also having knowledge graphs with semantics more. It's also AI, right? But not the flashy AI that we see every day with huge neural networks that can converse with you as if they were humans. This is the other side of AI, more traditional, the semantics base, which also have a big role here, formal methods. And the combination of all will unlock definitely a lot of value.
Juan, if I may add something there, I think you know, some of the hints to knowledge graph, for example, you know, those things are pretty cool. But in my view, there is a better way to take the best of the exciting machine learning technology and having the ability to bring in some domain expertise from the humans. So I think causal AI, the ability to fuse human and a machine is going to play a huge role into the future of this. And I hope we can do better than knowledge graphs. And you know, happy to share some ideas. You know, how we have seen this in some of the businesses we've been involved. Being able to bring the domain knowledge that a lot of your business users have in their head into a sophisticated machine learning algorithm, I think it's key. And when I say bringing domain knowledge, I do not mean, you know, a human selects some features that go into the algorithm. I am referring to a lot more sophisticated interaction between humans and machines. And I do think that is the future of this field.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I guess I'll agree with everybody, right? I'm just going to take the cop out there. But just as a practitioner, a supply chain practitioner, the one thing that I think is key to any sort of transformation, whether we call it AI or combination of techniques or anything else, is this notion that people want to automate a lot of decisions. and that those decisions, and acknowledge the fact that automating some of those decisions will be better than what a lot of supply chains are based on right now, which is a lot of manual decision making. But I think once you make that leap, then the transformation can happen. And then it's just a matter of what tools and techniques are used to get you there. And I think we probably all agree that most companies are moving in that direction in some way, shape, or form. And in some ways, I think the fact that Amazon exists and they've kind of disrupted the way a lot of supply chains work, and they have this kind of global view, has kind of forced other people to kind of think that way. But again, like I said, I agree with everybody on this particular point.
You're a good moderator.
So, like I said, we always have a COVID question nowadays, which is appropriate. COVID-19 has led to dramatic disruptions in the global supply chain. What specific supply chain use cases can be driven or enhanced with AI?
I guess I'll speak on this a little bit. When we talk about the biggest disruption, it's been, stock replenishment without a doubt. And so how do we find ways to do that? Traditionally, a lot of stock replenishment, when you're talking to planners and you're figuring out when are we going to replenish our stock, a lot of this, as you said before, Kermit, a lot of this is done manually. A lot of this is done on rule-based modeling, very simplistic, things you could throw into the Excel solver to figure out. What we're doing now is we're trying to figure out how can we incorporate some machine learning into that replenishment model? How can we, try to determine, bringing in other features such as more than just when, what our manufacturing schedule is, trying to work in our customer pattern 4 or 5 months. Load pooling is another area, traditionally, I shouldn't say traditionally, but a lot of times, we load a truck, we deliver that truck to the DC. How can we find ways now when our order, when we don't maybe have enough out, we need to allocate some different stock to different customers. We can't send them a full truckload. We can only send them a half. How can we find ways to, consolidate those loads into one truck and save money there? A lot of these are not just full AI problems. Some of these are optimization problems, linear algebra problems, but again, they all kind of fall within the same bucket. Let's find ways to utilize the data science team has things that might have been done manually in the past because it was just the easiest way to do it. But now, we don't have that luxury anymore.
It makes sense. Anybody else kind of ways that AI is driving supply chain use cases with impacts from the pandemic?
So I'll say, I guess this is kind of robotics in nature, but when you look at first mile,
losing you guys a little
mile,
bit
or long haul transport, we're leveraging technology that allows us to unlock autonomous vehicles. And I think truly, when you talk about the pandemics that can occur now and in the future, you want to reduce touch. You want to take humans out of the process if you can. And if you can get to autonomy, that's one way to do it. And I think that the combination of AI, sensor fusion, and all those different things that enable and unlock those first mile, last mile, and other delivery techniques.
I would like to paint a bit of a cautionary tale here for using the current state of the art of machine learning in trying to deal with situation when the world changes beyond recognition. So when COVID-19 or events of similar magnitude happens, essentially what happens to the world is in the fundamental causal drivers change. What used to drive certain demand and supply no longer drives demand and supply. Now, current machine learning technology relies on a lot of past data in order to make any predictions. And so using this technology in its current form is extremely dangerous because when, it works very well when the world is stable and nothing changes. but when the fundamentals of the world change, the causal drivers change, using this technology actually leads to worse predictions than using something like a toss of a coin. So a lot of data scientists will say, oh, but we can just retrain the models. The trouble is that all of the past data that is there is essentially irrelevant, and you end up having to train a machine learning model with having just a handful of data points. And most technologies would then fail altogether. So we recently did a study on a similar topic, something that is very, very directly from financial markets, but directly linked to supply chains and growth of manufacturing. And we found that if we use current machine learning techniques to predict what happens next, we would be at least 3 months late. So essentially, we would be better off, not having those algorithms at all, than having those algorithms kind of being very, very delayed by months until they tell you something meaningful. And so I think I just wanted to caution the world that using current machine learning technologies in a situation when the world is changing is not necessarily a great idea. Now, there are things you can do. There are emerging technologies like causal AI that will allow you to model things with very few data points and will allow you to adapt to change. But just using current approaches, would lead to outcomes that are worse than tossing a coin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, overall, just to add also and echo some of the thoughts that the other panelists have mentioned. This is a very unique situation, right? That COVID that has put everybody, all the entire world to its knees. I think if one silver lining or one good thing come out of this is that it hasn't been a super intelligent AI that has really destroyed the world, kind of Terminator, what a lot of people were scaring us, right? It was a virus. And it has really disrupted our supply chain or manufacturing or way of working. And also when we needed it the most, right? These promises of super AI, they were not there. It was just tales, like castles in the sky. So I agree with these cautionary tales, and also the power of data-driven methods, right? They are data, they are statistics, and we need to take everything as a grain of salt. On the other side of the coin, on the embodied kind of AI, right? When machine learning and other techniques are used to are merged also with automation and the physical world, there is also a big need right now to really pump those technologies up and come to the rescue, right? And I'm talking about techniques where robots can be more flexible, where we can add really, I mean, if you see today's automation, any automation, right? We have been very good at doing and automating the predictable things that you can do like mass production, and therefore you could do somewhere else in the world. But what this COVID crisis has pointed out is that we don't have any flexibility in those systems. And speed is important, but flexibility is also important. And that's where techniques that add more flexibility to automation, still, you have good old-fashioned control, you have modeling techniques, and you get the speed, but you don't stop just because your product is slightly different in production, or you even help humans or empower them in doing tasks as common as bin picking, palletizing, this kind of thing. So what COVID has done is that everybody was talking about those techniques for a long time, and it just has pushed the fast forward button. And now things that will have taken 5 years, now the demand is now, right? And everybody's really focusing on that.
Maybe that's one of the silver linings of everything.
I'd agree.
That, and also opening up the conversation for people working remotely or working from home.
I'd agree with Juan on what he's saying right there, that, we want to develop, we want to move towards a future where AI and robotics and whatnot, is a big part of it. However, right now you talk to people in the business, and we're trying to solve business problems. people in the business are telling you, I just need more manpower right now to get these, to get these orders out. I need to, fulfill these shipments. I need to get people in the factories to do X, Y, and Z. I think there is definitely a movement towards AI and the way that this is going to transform everything. But in the current moment, we just, a lot of it is going back to manual, just do it how it's always been done.
Well, when there's a shock, you have to go with your immediate reaction, and there's no time to set things up. But I think maybe the onus is on us that we continue pushing people and having those conversations. And then when inevitably, once we get out of this or close to being out of this, the conversation is going to be, hey, what are mitigation plans for the next one, or that sort of thing. And that's where we can step up and kind of make those sorts of suggestions and try to drive that for the future.
Yeah, and if anything, also more appreciation of solidifying your supply chain channels at that level, like end-to-end, have more control. Really zipping things around the world back and forth probably wasn't the best idea to start with, right? It was climate-wise, and it's not right now for different reasons, and also the political mess that we have right now. So really bringing back onshoring, manufacturing, controlling as much as you can, and bringing it close to consumption. It helps you to have more control. It helps the environment. It has a lot of benefits, right? And I think people will have more appreciation to that, right? Manufacturing for a long time, and I am from Silicon Valley, right? For 20 years, we didn't look at it. This was done somewhere else. And now it's time to really take a look at that. There are many startups also flourishing in this space. And as we said, at least there are some silver linings of this entire crisis.
Yeah, Juan, those are great points. I just want to add to Dave's comments. I'm not entirely sure that more humans are going to solve this complex problem. I think more data scientists are also not going to solve the problem. I think we need to have a lot more holistic way to being able to optimize these complex systems. We need technology that will look at the system as a whole, will be able to automatically build predictive causal models when it's needed at an extremely granular level, down to individual products and individual timeframes, and use that information together with the context of the environment and kind of yield a super cool kind of optimal solution. And I think then we can also solve some of the concerns that Juan mentioned around the environment, around around distance at which we ship things, and when we even manufacture them. Currently, we're really just optimizing things at such a high level that almost doesn't make any sense. We have one client, for example, that before they started using our technology, they had just 3 machine learning models that were deciding 10 million different permutations of endpoints for delivering of things, right? 3 models for 10 million permutations between destinations and timeframes. To us, that made no sense. How could you have 3 models that tell you how many goods you need to ship between 10 million location plus timeframes, right? We need to have technology that can look at this whole system, this 10 million permutations, figure out exactly how many things we need to ship between point A and B at time period T, A and B time period T plus 1, B and C time period T plus 1. That's 10 million models that one has to engineer. And by the way, not just once. As the world is changing, those models have to adapt. And then that is not actually end of the story. You need to use those outputs from those models and then figure out an optimal solution. That is an insanely hard problem that no data science team in the world can solve. But it is a solution worth doing, because then we can help the bottom line, we can help the environment, and we can manufacture and produce things just in time and reduce waste. But it's an insanely complicated problem, and I don't think enough people talk about it. And I don't think adding more humans to this will solve it. We need to add more technology to this problem, a lot higher level technology than the one we have been building so far to get there.
All right, next question. How are you adapting operations, and is AI a critical part of that change?
So I guess I'll just, I mentioned, my thoughts. Actually, there's a big overlap with some of the thoughts that I mentioned in this question. I think AI has to be the key component of the solution. I'm not gonna talk about how operations are adopted, because that's really not what my expertise lie in. But when it comes to AI and the next generation of this technology, I think most of the solution is there. If we have a KPI optimization platform, or a optimization platform that can look at the business as a whole, not just individual parts of it, but if we have a platform that can look at the whole business as a whole, can have that human knowledge embedded into it, can have that context embedded into it about the environment, and can automatically understand the world, understand those causal patterns that continuously change, I think that's the only way to properly optimize businesses like the business you guys represent. But that's not something you can download from the open source community and have you guys do it. It requires thinking at a much higher level of automation. But I do think it is the only way to optimize supply chain businesses.
And maybe I'll add to that. One of the things we're doing is trying to leverage digital twins when we can. Now, obviously, network level problems are very complex. What we're trying to do, what we're doing, is leveraging 3D physics-based environments inside of our buildings, so that we can have the environments to take packages that are flowing, to develop optimization models, and leverage AI to bring in all the data points and come up with options for our people in the building to select, and then loop that into some of the decision making as we leverage reinforcement techniques, reinforcement learning techniques, to build up the AI capability within the hubs and facilities, so that we can have a better overall flow control. And if you do that at the node on the network, then now the overall network will be better. Obviously, it's complex, looking at all the things that can happen network-wide, but we're taking those components, making them smarter, adding IoT so that we can have data points that we can leverage the data, and we're also infusing that into what we call our tech-enabled network. So we'll make our network much smarter as customer demands are changing as well. So outside of COVID, people want their packages sooner. They want them now. They want them the way they want them. So we're trying all the different techniques that enable us to do that.
Yeah, we can really not ignore that the world is much more complex than it has been before, right? We have constraints that are difficult to predict. As Darko said, right, every model that you have built in the past will be wrong if you just use data. If someone were asked for the typical interview question, right, where will you be in 5 years? Everybody will have gotten wrong, right? You are not going to predict, not based on data, not based on any model, that you're going to be sitting at home working for months, continuing. It's also highlighting the fact that we need to create more resilient networks, right? You just take a look at the data and the predictions on the economy or anything in the next months, when the schools are going to open, when are we going to go back to normal. It's impossible to predict, right? You can have the best models in the past, and nobody can predict when it's a second wave, when was the first wave. You can have good indications, right, and embed that in the way that you make decisions, but still there is a lot of uncertainty. And maybe we have to live with that uncertainty for the future, but it's also important to start thinking about how do you make things more resilient anyway, right? And if the next pandemic comes or another black swan event, can you be more resilient as you are now? Because right now you are very interconnected, right? You supply chain, your operations, you depend on things that are out of your control, and it's okay up to a certain point, but the more you have it under control, and I think that's also happening right now, how operations are switching to really realize, okay, how can I really control more of things that are critical for my business? And one thing is I can just still live with the uncertainty.
Yeah, I'm going back to what I kind of said when we had the yes/no question. It ended up not being a yes/no question. One of the big things about adapting operations, in my mind, is to make it so that it's scalable and humans don't have to make all the decisions. And then it's a question of how you do that and when you do that, what techniques you use. And I think that's kind of the key point. And the thing that we are kind of on the journey of doing that for various aspects of our supply chain. And more we're kind of going on that path. Now, one thing that I might disagree a little bit with Darko on is the fact that integrating everything and solving for everything all at once, number one, it's really hard to do. Number two, I think there are disadvantages to doing that. And one of the disadvantages is flexibility. You could argue, even though that's not where we're all driving to or want to drive to, that if we had no systems and we just had people, if we had armies of people, one thing that's nice about people is they're kind of flexible. So you could say, hey, announcement, people, do something different, and they will. Systems don't necessarily act that way, but the one nice thing is if you have a bunch of modular systems that do individual jobs, you know, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Then you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of making adjustments or transformations, which is another thing that I think our company is kind of driving to. Instead of having monolithic stacks that determine a whole bunch of things, try to have many stacks or many processes that might write on the same platform, but if you want to change the logic for one aspect of the whole, you know, supply chain, you change one box instead of a giant box that might have some implications or some unintended consequences in other areas. So that's kind of the way that we're moving. And again, maybe AI isn't part of that whole architecture strategy, but it is in a lot of the boxes, I think. Yeah. All right, so this is a big one, especially given our panelists. How are robotics impacting supply chains?
So I think in terms of robotics, I think robots are giving you choices, right? So now, prior to COVID-19, robotics was a field that's been chased. I think trying to implement robots in an existing job setup is hard, it's complex. Trying to do it in greenfield job setups is complex. But I think that when it gets down to it, when you're able to develop a robot, it doesn't get impacted by pandemics, right? So you now have the option of running the robots all day long if you need. Obviously, there's got service and maintenance and all those things, but they don't need to take breaks. So I think that robots are giving you the ability to extend your workforce. So if you have some people that are available, you put those you put them in places where judgment is needed, where robots aren't going to have the return on investment quite yet, where those solutions can fit, and then you leverage what you have. And I think, to me, what we're doing with robots at UPS is that we're trying to think about how can I take advantage of the job setups that are available with robots deployed to those locations, even if maybe in some cases it's not quite 100%, because many of these robots that we're developing and deploying, they have the ability to get better over time as they see the different packages that are coming through the system. So I think they can be slightly deployed suboptimal, and then they get better over time, and then they get to the point where they can kind of meet or exceed human capability in some job setups. But I think that robots are going to be key and critical for us to get to this point where, if the supply chain is impacted again by pandemics, we now have the capability to go to this alternate force of labor, if you will, to make it through these situations. And if I have a robot in places where it makes sense and humans in places where they make sense, I can take some of the uncertainty out of the supply chain and be able to flow volume to customers as they need these essential packages and things during pandemics.
Very good points, Greg. I think I fully agree and echo this kind of words. Robotics, I've been working in robotics for many years, and suddenly this crisis hit us. As I said before, at least one of the nice things is that this idea of Terminator, that robots are killing jobs and are really going to destroy humanity, this is going to go away, right? Because that's where we need them the most. And it's really pressing, as I said before, also the fast forwarding button on adding more autonomy into the robotics that was always in discussions, but now it's a necessity. It's not just a nice to have. The interesting thing is also when we take a look at the flexibility, right, on these robot systems and automation in general, right? We had a lot of robots deployed in manufacturing, right, particularly on traditional industries like automotive. But they do the same thing all over again, right? It's always repetitive, and that's very fast and proven, and that's what you needed. But if you see where the flexibility is, it's all done by humans. If you see where the last part, the assembly part, done by humans. If you see, for example, and that's also one of the mistakes that some famous auto manufacturer made in the past here from California, right? Trying to underappreciate the dexterity and the flexibility of humans. So it's interesting to see how the more robots you see in manufacturing, it's not like you see less humans, you see more humans, because these are really related one to each other. But to be honest, they were very rigid, not agile. And now, for example, if we needed to transition a factory to stop producing cars and start doing ventilators or start doing PPE, the engineering time that goes into changing this kind of systems is enormous. So it's difficult to justify. So there are other trends, and that's where AI, also machine learning, but also digitalization and other techniques are coming into play to really give more flexibility to these robots, to not be 100% constrained. Okay, my part is slightly bit different, my package is different. Can I still figure out how to pick it, how to place it? If you just think about most of the tasks that happen in manufacturing, you go to a factory, 38%, 40% of all the tasks is simply moving things from A to B, right? You move from a bin to a shelf, from a shelf to a machine, and that's all that it is. And robots are getting much better on that. It's amazing how problems like grasping or picking was considered the holy grail of robotics years ago, and now there are many solutions, and now this is ready, really. But we are not talking about really also cognitive systems that really understand what they are doing. And probably we don't need that. I don't need a robot to understand what it's doing. I need a robot to be more flexible, to be adaptable, still have the speed, but don't stop if my package is slightly different, right? Still complete your task. And that's also a big difference between when we talk about artificial intelligence, between the kind of the world of data science, the world that all the machines that you can do fit with a lot of data in a server, and the embodied part, right? where you are just relying on data when things are really hard to model, right? I will not throw my robot controller out of the window because machine learning is here, right? I will leverage that. I will use my traditional control as much as I can. And areas where it's hard to model, like contacts, things like humans do without thinking, that's where I use data-driven methods. And that's very powerful. And we are seeing a lot of results also there. And in this sense, you don't need a lot of data because you also have models to build upon, and simulations and digital twins, as we said before, right? If you put all of these things together, then robotics is a very powerful tool that before, just to make it very clear, right? It was still very powerful, but kind of put in cages because these things, I only need them for their speed. Now I can start to use them also for their flexibility.
Anybody else have anything to add? We have our 2 robotics experts chiming in.
I mean, I'm not a robotics person, but what I do know a little bit, and you talk about this idea of flexibility and, agile is the word every company is using now. Where are robots right now in the ability to utilize, to train on a simple task and then say, okay, now, we can train it on another simple task and another simple task, and you can kind of, agilely increase, its learning, over the course of many different things. So if you switch over that line, you can train it on another task very simply. Is that type of robotics exist? Is that, on the market? That's kind of an open question.
I'll say for the stuff that we're working on, we're looking at the job setups, and we're targeting robots for a job, because it's not just the AI, it's the machine vision, which is complex, trying to identify different things. You have this wide range of things that you have to identify. It's very, very complex. And then on top of that, the gripping is very complex when you're trying to pick up different types of objects. So the gripper, the machine vision, all of that limits you to some degree. However, I will say you'll see general purpose robots starting to pop up in places. We'll see where that goes. General purpose robots, let's say they're walking around or moving around in different ways. Now, can I take that type of robot, walk to one job setup, turn on the program for sorting, leave that job setup, go to another setup, and do another task, turn that program on? I think that is something that is emerging, not here yet, but generally speaking, you develop the robot for a task in your environment.
Fully agree, Greg. I think you brought very good points on the type of flexibility and agility on those systems, right? They need to be on one side very specific to the task, because we also require not only the flexibility but the speed, right? You want still the throughput. You don't want that to go away, right? If my human was giving me 40 packets per minute or 400 picks per hour, I want my robot to do the same or better, right? And that comes with the specialization, right? When you are very specialized, you are very fast. But what we are seeing, and this is an emerging trend on autonomy, really on manufacturing, is really start forgetting about pre-programming every single motion and give more freedom to the system. And that's a different mindset on programming in terms of skills. Like my robot can pick. I will tune it to the task, but it can pick almost everything, no matter where I go. And if my kinematics are fine, then my robot could also do a machine tending operation in the future if I just download software, right? It's more a software-driven manufacturing world versus traditionally that was where hardware had a big role. And in the future, it's the two things, right? Is not only we will probably not be as flexible as human in any foreseeable future, but we don't have to be, right? To be honest, we can really help the work of robots. And that's how it's fundamentally different from the world of autonomous cars, right? When you think about autonomy, you immediately think about autonomous cars because that's the hype and that's cool. But if you have seen, right, there was tremendous progress, and now it seems to be kind of stalled because the last 1% is so hard, because I cannot constrain my environment. guess what? I mean, in manufacturing, I can almost constrain everything else into logistics. I can make the work much easier. What is very important is that all these systems are connected, right? It's not just that I put a robot and then my life will be different. I need to feed the data, right? I need to avoid the silos that are common in manufacturing. So I need to be able to have my digital twins of the entire production from design to manufacturing, right? Because things that are super easy for a human may be difficult for a robot and vice versa. And if I just slightly change some of the parameters along the way, my life will be much easier, right? But traditionally, there were silos always, right? You had the design team, the engineering, and then manufacturing. But if you put everything together and you can reason there, then you can also get a lot of advantages there.
All right, so we have about a little less than 5 minutes, and we have one more question. This is kind of a futuristic question on where does everybody see AI taking supply chains over the next 5 years? And hopefully on year 5, we're not having to deal with COVID or any other pandemic.
Hopefully COVID goes away in the next year, and then you have I will say, helping adding resilience to the system, adding more flexibility to autonomy and robotics, and really being merged with what humans can add to the table and enhance the capabilities of humans. And as I said before, not just AI, but as a puzzle, as a piece of the puzzle where digitalization and other techniques come also together to increase the resilience of your operations and your supply chain.
And I'll just throw in, I think that one thing we have to do is be connected to our customer. So as the customer is now sitting at home and they make a delivery choice, or they buy something online, now to me I see in the next 5 years, that choice moving into the manufacturing or the shipping automatically, taking the taking the materials, packaging it, and then moving through the supply chain autonomously as we bring on autonomous delivery vans, or ship across the country, and autonomous feeders that are moving across the country. And then getting to the point where as well that autonomous delivery comes in, whether it be drones, whether it be bots of some kind coming to your door. Is that the next 5 years? I think it could happen. And I think that as people start to get a little bit more comfortable with what robots look like, because I think customer acceptance is going to be big in all of this. I think people are going to be more receptive, because either I pick robot or I pick a human that could also be bringing COVID-19 to my door. And I think that changes things as we move forward.
Yeah, what I would say when I look at the next kind of 5 years is I don't know what problems we're going to solve. I don't know what AI will look like, but what I can tell you is right now we are sitting on just mountains of data that have not been utilized yet by AI. We haven't found reasons to utilize this data. When I think about all the different companies that are implementing these massive data lakes and just sitting on tons and tons of data coming through, but a lot of that data just kind of, and so the question of how are we going to look up on what opportunities exist, and how do we use all that data that's kind of sitting around. Supply chain, it's really an that's just ripe for transformation, especially when it comes to just anything AI related. And I think that's kind of we're gonna.
And
Right.
Darko, any thoughts
Yes.
in the last 30, 45 seconds or so?
Sure. Yes, so I think Dave is right. Most organizations right now think that that AI does not help them, and I don't blame them, because the approach is very short-sighted. Most organizations think that by hiring a team of data scientists and dumping the data lake on them, the problem will be solved. But I think what I can say is that I've seen AI, I've seen our technology transforming businesses like yours and it can do amazing things if it's done the right way, if the problem is considered from the right starting point. So if we've considered the problem of let's go and hand tune models and fit some curve, AI will never deliver. But if we step back and think, how can we model this more holistically with some next generation AI technologies, I think AI has a lot to give. I will again say AI does not really exist in my view yet. We are yet to bring it to the world. We just currently have curve fitting machines, which are really not going to do much. But in the next 5 years, we'll have a lot more sophisticated AI that will do things that we can only imagine today. So I think there's a bright future for AI and can play a key role in optimizing the supply chain businesses.
Great. I think you guys summarized it pretty well. The only thing I'd add, and it's just my own particular thing, given the fact that I work on transportation a lot, is I would really like to see more autonomous semi-trucks going on the road, even if just between major points, even if you have a human driver do things within the city, just because, there's a general shortage of truck drivers out there and we got a lot off the ship. So that's number one on my wish list.
Let's make it happen.
Exactly.
The impossible just takes time.
Thank you all so much for such an insightful panel. I really appreciate it. And there's a big virtual round of applause from the audience. Let's say thank you again to all of our panelists. We appreciate your time and your insight. And if you're looking for your next agenda item, you can check the agenda online and find your next session, or you can look at the networking opportunities to participate in one of those sessions. Thank you again, and we'll see you around.